Nisayama in January 2020. We see a boy running through the forest at night. Suddenly, he falls, and we hear a voice calling out Hikaru's name. Another voice asks if they've found him. The boy gets up from the ground, grabs a flashlight, and keeps going. We hear the voice again calling for Hikaru, and saying it's no use. We hear another person saying they can't search here and should turn back. Meanwhile, the boy runs through the darkness of the rain-soaked forest, as if he's looking for something. We see an injured person saying Yoshiki. Then we see a backpack lying on the ground, and the boy calls out Hikaru, but he gives up when he sees it's just a tree trunk, and continues running. After that, we see a pained eye saying, "The great Unoki," and that he needs someone. Then we see the boy shouting Hikaru. Suddenly, we see an injured boy lying on the ground reaching out for help. Then, we shift to a bright morning. In the village of Kobatashi in July 2020, we hear a boy asking for some ice cream. He says the weather is nice and cool. Another boy responds, "This is all they have here," and shares the ice cream with another boy. He asks what the story is with the spelling mistakes here. We see two friends sitting together, one complaining to the other that the damn Mr. Hara is forcing them to wander under the scorching sun. One of them responds saying, "Hikaru, you need to watch your words." It becomes clear that the boy with blonde hair is Hikaru. He tells his friend, "You have a point," and starts eating the ice cream. His friend reminds him that they lost him for a whole week on that mountain, but Hikaru doesn't remember this. The boy is puzzled because his friend Hikaru doesn't recall it, even after half a year since the incident. Hikaru asks his friend what he's trying to achieve with these questions. His friend replies that they were extremely worried about him that day. Hikaru then asks his friend if he felt alone without him, and his friend answers no. But Hikaru calls him a liar, insisting he must have been crying and saying, "Hikaru, don't leave me alone." His friend puts his hands on his head. Hikaru feels upset at that moment and looks at his friend, accusing him of bullying him for being small. It becomes clear they were sitting at the school bus stop. We hear Hikaru's friend wanting to ask him a strange question. Hikaru jokes with him, asking if he will confess his love for him. His friend denies it, and clarifies that he's been thinking about something for a while. During this, we see a shadow looming over them. Hikaru's friend continues and says, "You're not Hikaru, are you?" Hikaru is surprised by his friend's words, saying he thought he was mimicking him perfectly. Suddenly, we see a face from which something strange emerges. His friend is astonished by this and drops the ice cream from his hands. Hikaru approaches his friend, his face showing this strange thing, and hugs him, asking him not to tell anyone. He continues, saying he found immense pleasure in living as a human, explaining that it's a real joy for him, and asks him not to tell anyone because he doesn't want to be killed. His friend falls silent, unable to speak from shock, and it becomes clear that Hikaru is gone with no way to change that. His friend cries and promises not to tell anyone about it. After a while, we hear someone asking what Hikaru will do after graduating from Kibugayama High School. We see that Hikaru has grown older. He explains that he doesn't know what he'll do after graduation, and continues that he'll work on his grandfather's farm. Then he looks at the person speaking and asks, "What about you, Yoshiki?" It becomes clear that his friend's name is Yoshiki. Yoshiki tells him he also doesn't know what he'll do after high school. Hikaru tells him he's smart and must leave the village and go to college in Tokyo. He jokes with him, saying, "You don't want to leave me, right?" We see Hikaru walking in the village telling Yoshiki that even if he finds a girlfriend in Tokyo, he will never leave Yoshiki's house so that Yoshiki won't take her away. We hear Yoshiki say, as if he could find a girlfriend. Hikaru tells him that he always frowns when talking about that, assuring him that he will find a girlfriend easily. After that, we see Hikaru walking, and Yoshiki puts his hand on him and asks how he is. Yoshiki asks Hikaru about the weekend. Hikaru tells him he's going to the mountains. Yoshiki asks why the mountains. Hikaru tells him it's a secret. Then we see Yoshiki waking up suddenly in his room. We hear someone saying, "Wake up, Yoshiki. Breakfast is ready." Meanwhile, Yoshiki is convincing himself it was just a dream about the last day he was alive. He continues, "The last thing he saw was mimicking Mr. Hara. We see him in pain on his bed, and someone calling out to him, saying breakfast is ready. We see Yoshiki coming down the stairs and seeing two women. One of the women asks him how he is and why he was awake all night. After that, we find Yoshiki having breakfast with someone, and he hears the weather news, and learns that this summer will be scorching. The person asks him about Kaoru. Is she still sleeping? And we see her sleeping. Then we return to Yoshiki, who is browsing on his phone. We hear a woman say Hikaru has arrived. Yoshiki gets up and goes, and we see Hikaru saying good morning. Yoshiki looks at him, leaves his house, and tells him they need to hurry now, otherwise, they'll be late. Hikaru looks at him and agrees, so they won't be scolded by Mr. Hera. We see Yoshiki and Hikaru walking down the road. Hikaru talks about his mom who prepared food and they gobbled it up. Meanwhile, Yoshiki looks at him and thinks to himself, it doesn't matter who Hikaru is, he's better than not being around. After that, we see someone named Tanaka carrying a bag with a hamster knocking on a door in a building. His company sent him to Kibugayama High School. In the next scene, we see a group of students practicing a song, including Yoshiki, with a schoolmate next to him mocking him as he sings. Yoshiki looks over at Hikaru, who's gazing in shock. Then we shift to Tanaka, who breaks into a room, followed by a man and a woman, and says there's something suspicious. He looks at a spot in the room and says yes, it's there. Then we see the student singing, while Tanaka rummages through the room. Suddenly, we see the face of a strange creature on the wall of the room as if it's singing along with the students. We see Tanaka breaking into a part of the room. Meanwhile, a teacher says there's talent among the students. Then we switch to Tanaka, who successfully breaks into this place. Next, we see Yoshiki's and Hikaru's classmate complaining on the stairs that he's exhausted and asks why there's a singing party among all the activities. Yoshiki explains that he thinks it's a compensation for last year's cancelled cultural festival. We hear Hikaru say he liked singing. Yoshiki says you didn't sing, you were just staring at the paper. Hikaru clarifies that he was curious to know the meaning of the song's lyrics. During this, two girls appear from behind and ask where they're going. They explain they don't have a science class but have a meeting in the classroom and will watch a movie. Here, Hikaru gets excited. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka talking on the phone, explaining that there's not a single atom related to this thing. We hear the voice on the line saying this is disappointing. Tanaka says it seems the company hasn't learned anything after centuries of research, and he can't believe it still exists. We see the girl talking to him in a deserted place, telling him to stop complaining about their company because someone might inform the managers. Tanaka reassures her not to worry because he takes his work seriously. He hangs up and goes to the room to see the man and woman hugging. He looks at them, thinking this will not be easy to find. We see the students in the classroom watching a movie. Yoshiki doesn't like this movie and looks at Hikaru, who is watching the film and crying. Yoshiki asks him why he's crying. Hikaru explains that they have seen this movie 5 times. He tells him that he knows it and it's stored in his memory, but for him, it's like watching it for the first time. Afterwards, we see Hikaru standing with Yoshiki, looking for his key. Yoshiki advises him to check his bag. At this moment, a girl asks her friend if she's practicing at home. We see Hikaru searching his bag for the key, and the two girls are joking with each other. Finally, Hikaru finds his key. We see a group of students about to play music. Yoshiki says to Hikaru, "Let's go." The students start playing music, and we see scenes from the school, students, and classrooms. Hikaru and Yoshiki walk and talk to each other, while players are playing baseball and others are playing volleyball. We see Hikaru and Yoshiki riding their bike down the road. We notice a sign for a shopping area on Daruma Street. Hikaru and Yoshiki see a poster for Master X Master, and Hikaru smiles. Then we see Hikaru holding food and looking very happy, looking at Yoshiki and saying they've eaten this sometimes. Yoshiki replies yes. Hikaru devours the food and shouts that this food is really delicious. Yoshiki advises him to lower his voice and wonders if he remembers the food experience, yet it feels new. Hikaru clarifies at that moment that he can recall memories, but not the experiences themselves. He explains that he wasn't alive before, and this is his first experience as a person. Yoshiki wonders if he is a ghost. Hikaru responds that he doesn't know. Then we see a cat approach them, and he continues that it's a fierce beast. The cat comes closer, and we learn its name is Mine. Yoshiki explains that this cat has grown big because the butcher feeds it meat all the time. Hikaru approaches the cat. Suddenly, the cat screams and runs away in fear of Hikaru. Hikaru is happy with the cat's quick escape. Yoshiki looks at that sadly and fearfully. Yoshiki asks Hikaru if there's anywhere he wants to visit in town. Hikaru asks him if he will go with him. He's surprised by Yoshiki because he's being nice to him. Yoshiki clarifies that it's not kindness but rather lenience for everyone, especially for himself. Hikaru doesn't understand what Yoshiki means, but he sees that he's always nice to him. Then we see an elderly lady standing outside a restaurant, asking for food. But when Hikaru rides past her, the woman panics and looks at him as he rides his bike. We see the friends walking on a bridge over water. Hikaru notices a dragonfly sitting on a bike. Yoshiki explains that the summer red dragonfly is completely different from the autumn red dragonfly. Hikaru asks him about the difference, but Yoshiki doesn't want to explain that now. He says that the autumn and summer red dragonflies are very similar, yet are 2 different types of dragonflies. Hikaru responds saying that's why they call you Emil. Yoshiki leaves him and wonders what this thing looks like. Hikaru but isn't. Hikaru asks him to wait for him. Yoshiki stands talking to himself, saying this is madness because he's humorously playing along with it and that he's really scared, not understanding why, and is almost losing his mind, but says even if this Hikaru is fake, he wants him to stay. Meanwhile, Hikaru asks him that he wants to continue reading Master X Master. Yoshiki looks at him and agrees, then looks at a spider house, and asks where he got to in his reading, and he understands from Hikaru that he's still at the beginning. He tells him he can continue reading at home, but he doesn't have the third part. Hikaru asks Yoshiki why he has 11 copies of the first part. At this moment, we see an old woman standing in front of them screaming, saying in panic why the great Nonuki has descended from the mountain. Hikaru wonders what she means, but Yoshiki tells him not to interfere. He explains these things frighten him. Hikaru understands this and takes a step back, but the woman panics from him and runs away, yelling for him to go away, and she enters her house and shuts the door. Yoshiki asks Hikaru to leave, but Hikaru's eyes turn red. After that, the friends reach the village, and Yoshiki asks Hikaru if the real Hikaru is dead. The fake Hikaru responds yes. He continues that his body is warm and his heart beats, but he is dead. He explains that when he found him, he was dying, and recounts what he remembers from that day, that he was wandering in the mountains for a long time, feeling nothing, and found Hikaru dying. Suddenly, he became like he is now. Yoshiki reaches the door of his house, and the fake Hikaru says, "See you tomorrow." Before he leaves, Yoshiki asks him if it pleases him. Hikaru is surprised and answers yes. Yoshiki thinks to himself this is the first time he says that, and tells him while crying not to leave him again, and goes into his house and closes the door. Hikaru leaves. Yoshiki dreams of this creature, and around him, people are talking, and we see a strange creature approaching the old woman's house. And the lady, scared, says go away. The creature speaks in a scary voice, asking her to open the door because he has a package for her. The lady, frightened, doesn't want to open it. At this moment, Yoshiki wakes up to the sound of his family, and we see the creature trying to enter the old woman's house, and Yoshiki is crying. The old lady says a package at this hour is unreasonable, and the creature knows she is inside, and repeats, "Oh, Lady Matsura." The lady screams and screams, and in this moment, we see Yoshiki crying. After that, silence falls in Lady Matsura's house. We hear Hikaru's voice saying he's inside. Lady Matsura turns her face and suddenly screams, and we hear Yoshiki's voice saying, "Good evening, Hikaru." After that, we see police standing in front of Lady Matsura's house, and she is identified by her daughter. Meanwhile, we see a man saying he is next. He continues that the great Nonuki is coming for him. During this, we see two men saying the endo rituals have failed. Then we move to Tanaka, who is on the phone with someone named Takeda, saying he will go there in the morning, and that he will offer help. He adds that he doesn't prefer to go to the village of Kobitashi, and that the villagers don't know what they are dealing with, and he won't be dealt with easily. The events begin with Hikaru shouting at Yoshiki to slow down as he is riding his bike quickly. However, Yoshiki suddenly stops, and Hikaru scolds him for doing so. Yoshiki stops because he sees a police car driving in front of him. He asks Hikaru what happened, and Hikaru responds that Mrs. Matsuura passed away that morning. Yoshiki says her name was Matsuura and remembers her face as she was screaming. Hikaru is happy because it's the first time he's seen a police car, and Yoshiki looks at him nervously. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka saying his car has approached the village. Then we see Hikaru standing in school with a teacher, and we hear a female student say, "Do you remember what Hera said this morning in class?" Yoshiki responds, "Is it about the old woman?" The girl replies, "Yes, she committed suicide by putting her fist into her throat." One of their friends shouts in fear, stating she must have seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Yoshiki looks at Hikaru, suspecting he might have a hand in the old woman's death. Another girl clarifies that the terrifying things happening recently are giving her nightmares. The friend who was scared thinks he might be cursed because he always takes the eastern mountain path to get home. Since the tunnel is under construction, he shortcuts through the forest, which he finds very scary. This makes the girl tense. The boy explains that he can't see well through the forest and feels frozen when he looks up. Suddenly, another girl exclaims that she loves this story. The friend asks Yoshiki to accompany him home, but Yoshiki refuses while looking at Hikaru. The friend asks why not and begs him as if it's a test of courage. Yoshiki responds that he'll leave that to the tourists they receive, but the friend pleads with him. Suddenly, Hikaru appears and says he is ready to go with them. Everyone is surprised and asks him if he's sure. One of the girls questions if he didn't faint while watching a horror movie. Hikaru clarifies that these things no longer scare him and asks Yoshiki, "Right?" Yoshiki looks at him nervously and answers, "Yes." The friend says that Yoshiki, Yuki, Asako, and Hikaru will accompany him home, and Asako explains that they will all be safe together. Meanwhile, Tanaka arrives at the village and apologizes for being late. A man from the village shouts at him for being too late. state. Tanaka asks to talk about it indoors due to the heat. We see an abandoned house, and we hear Tanaka talking to the villagers, and they employed him to investigate the matter. Tanaka breaks the glass of the door, and they all enter. They find the place disgusting. Tanaka asks the standing person, named Takeda, about his father. Takeda explains that his father is scared and refuses to leave his room to kill. Tanaka laughs upon hearing this. Takeda gets angry at him, grabs him by his clothes, and explains that people are dying in the village. He believes Tanaka's company came to ruin the place. Tanaka clarifies that allowing an ignorant company to change the land would have caused a disaster, but his company prevented it, so he must be thanked for that. Someone from the village says, "A company we wish we knew about, not just Mrs. Matsuura, but there are strange things happening in the village, and the Endo family's son is missing." He continues that their rituals failed, leading to a worsening situation. We see the 5 friends have reached the forest and are looking at it fearfully. Asako asks Yuki if she is scared. Yuki replies that it's impossible. Suddenly, their friend screams in fear that he is very scared and might die, but they ignore his words and enter the forest while he follows them. Later, we see that they crossed the forest path without anything happening to them. Their friend thanks them for accompanying him home and wishes them caution on their way back. Meanwhile, we see old posters, and we hear Tanaka's voice saying, "The Great Nunoki." He explains that Mrs. must have seen something in her past. We hear the villagers say that she must have experienced a traumatic event in the mountains as a child, and she saw it. Tanaka searches and says this must have driven her mad. The villagers clarify that she wasn't like that, but her daughter disappeared without a trace. Tanaka asks if they knew her well, and continues that this woman was afraid of what was in the mountain, but the more scared she became, the more he was drawn to her. Meanwhile, we see the 4 friends in the forest. Yoshiki says they should return through the forest on foot. Asako finds it exhausting. Yuki clarifies that an insect bit her. Asako was happy about the weather. Yoshiki looks at her nervously, but while they walk, someone is watching them. Suddenly, Yoshiki sees a crooked white line in the forest, but this line changes shape. Yoshiki wonders what it is. He sees a figure with a long head swaying back and forth approaching him. Yoshiki gets scared, but he hears Hikaru saying to him, "I saw it, it's following you." He continues that this does not bode well, and its eyes are glowing red. Suddenly, we hear a commotion and see Hikaru screaming, blood coming from his nose. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka sitting with the villagers, and one of them asks why they came to Mikasa's house. Tanaka explains that he needed a safer place. He clarifies that he set up a barrier around the shrine in Mikasa's house, making everyone wonder. He continues that he visited the mountain this morning and found this bag there. We hear one of the villagers say that it was the bag Kohei used. They ask if Hikaru took it to the mountain. Tanaka tells them to look at what he found inside, and they get scared when they see a black stone with a face. Tanaka is confident it was someone's head. They wonder why this thing is in the bag. Tanaka replies, "Who knows, maybe it's for exorcising spirits in the forest." He holds it and smiles, saying it will not harm them as long as the stone is with them. He initially thought this thing had something to do with desecrating the mountain. A man from the village asks if the desecration of the mountain is gone. Tanaka responds that it's an exaggeration to attribute everything to it, especially after what happened with the grandma. Yakita asks what he means. He explains that it came down from the mountain. Everyone is astonished. Tanaka continues, saying it is hidden and lurking. One of them says that Yuki was right. Kabutan asks, "What should we do now?" Tanaka asks them if he can search now. We return to the friends, hearing the noise, and see Asako in pain, pressing her hand against her head, asking, "What is this noise?" She falls to the ground. Yuki calls to her, and suddenly we see Asako grab Yuki's hand and pull her, and they run through the forest. In this moment, Yoshiki wakes Hikaru, who opens his eyes. Yoshiki asks him if he's okay. Hikaru puts his hands on his nose and responds that it's just a nosebleed. He asks if Yoshiki has any tissues. Yoshiki replies no. He asks Yoshiki what he did. Hikaru clarifies that this thing wanted to stick to Yoshiki, so he crushed it and ate it. He adds, it seems he absorbed it or swallowed it, but it overwhelmed him, causing a nosebleed. Hikaru warns Yoshiki not to look at anything but him. He adds that it's chasing him because he looked at it and he is the only one allowed to cling to him. Yoshiki gets surprised at this, but Hikaru pulls him by his shirt and accuses him of ignorance, ordering him not to look at it and to tell him if he sees something else. Yoshiki asks him to stop pulling his shirt. Meanwhile, Asuka and Yuki were watching them from outside the forest. They apologize for leaving them, but see Hikaru bleeding. Hikaru explains that he fell. Yuki confirms they heard a loud popping sound. Hikaru responds that maybe someone accidentally fired a starting gun and tells them to calm down. that nothing happened. Asako wonders if that sound seemed that way to them. The scary feeling about the forest disappears, and Hikaru looks at her with his red eyes. Asako continues and asks if they all canceled each other out. Yoshiki asks Hikaru if he is sure he hasn't been hurt. Hikaru clarifies that he doesn't know what pain feels like. Suddenly, Hikaru looks at Yoshiki as if examining him and tells himself he doesn't have to take him. He'll stick with him anyway. Suddenly, we see fire. Hikaru smiles and inwardly says, "I'll make sure it doesn't take me away." Then we see burning fragments of fire and hear someone say, "Hikaru, if you find a woman you like, hurry up and marry her." Hikaru replies, "What happens if I don't?" The person replies that the great Onoki will drag her to the mountain and that it's the Endo family rule and they have an agreement not to harm their family. She will be safe if you marry her. We hear Hikaru ask, "Why does he take people?" The person replies, "Because he is lonely. He won't take our family, but he will take someone close to us," and clarifies that it's just a legend. Hikaru replies in bewilderment. He feels lonely. Later, at school, we see Yoshiki and Hikaru in a room, and Yoshiki wants to understand how Hikaru swallowed that thing. Hikaru opens his shirt for Yoshiki and tells him to look at it. Yoshiki looks at him and is shocked when he sees a slit in Hikaru's stomach, and Hikaru asks him, "Do you want to put your hands inside?" Yoshiki puts his hands inside and screams, and Hikaru grabs his hand. Yoshiki explains that there is something strange inside. Hikaru asks him, "What's the texture like?" Yoshiki answers that it feels like raw, marinated chicken, and cold. Hikaru says, "You're kind of warm," and continues that it's been a long time since he's felt something alive inside him, and asks him to put his hands further inside. Yoshiki puts his hands further inside, and Hikaru feels happy, and here Yoshiki felt something pulling him in, so he quickly pulled his hand out, and Hikaru laughs and asks him, "Did that scare you?" Yoshiki asks him, "What is that?" and wipes his hand. Hikaru asks him, "Didn't you like that feeling?" Yoshiki puts his hands on Hikaru's head and tells him to close his shirt buttons and asks him, "Are you a caveman?" Hikaru replies, "Maybe," and Yoshiki laughs. And in the store, we see a woman shopping, and she sees the saleswoman talking to Yoshiki and asks him about his younger sister, and Yoshiki looks at her. The saleswoman continues that his sister is absent from school a lot, and the Yamazakis were worried because they said she can't get up early, and she chatters a lot while ringing him up, and Yoshiki didn't talk to her, and she gives him the change in his hands, and Yoshiki leaves the store and remembers the feeling when his hand was inside Hikaru and approaches his bicycle. Suddenly, we see someone grabbing his hand and asking him to stop immediately. Yoshiki looks to see that the woman who was in the store is telling him that he is in big trouble. Yoshiki asks her, "What did I do?" The woman explains to him that he is approaching something extremely dangerous and advises him to stay away from him or he will become mixed. Yoshiki is surprised and asks her, "What is mixed?" The woman replies that it is difficult to explain and continues that if he mixes with him too much, he will no longer be human. Yoshiki asks her, "Who are you?" The woman replies in concern that he shouldn't be afraid, that she is just a housewife who happened to pass by here and that she sees things that others don't see, and asks him, "Do you know the forbidden area in the mountains near Kobitashi village?" She continues that she has felt a terrifying air emanating from it for a while. Yoshiki recounts that this is the mountain where his friend Hikaru was lost. The woman continues that suddenly everything disappeared recently and wonders where this terrifying feeling disappeared to and asks him if that feeling is accompanying him now. Yoshiki asks her, "Why? Do you know something?" The woman replies, "Not really," and continues that she is sure there is something going on and it can't continue like this, and waits for him and says she has never seen a case like this before and continues that there must be his own reasons. Yoshiki remembers Hikaru. The woman continues that Yoshiki should call her when he is ready to talk and gave him her number, and at night, Yoshiki, while in his bed, looks at the woman's name on his phone, and it's called Rei Kurubayashi, and then Yoshiki remembers all the events that happened to him during the day, especially his hand inside Hikaru, and closes his eyes and imagines Hikaru calling his name and repeating it, and suddenly says, "Stop," and Yoshiki opens his eyes and imagines Hikaru telling him that it's a secret, and smiles and falls asleep. We see Yoshiki and Hikaru looking younger. Hikaru tells Yoshiki that he was inspired by watermelons, as shown in comic books. Yoshiki is disgusted with Hikaru. Suddenly, Hikaru is shocked because he swallowed a seed. Hikaru explains that a friend's father swallowed a watermelon seed before and turned into a striped watermelon man. Yoshiki asks what happened to him after that, and Hikaru replies that he died. Yoshiki explains that he also swallowed a watermelon seed. They both cry. Meanwhile, Hikaru's father was watching them. He approaches approached them and asked why they were crying. They ask him for help. He reassures them that they will be fine. After that, we see Yoshiki carrying a watermelon. He looks at his phone at the name of the lady he met at the store, but Yoshiki puts his phone in his pocket. Then he goes to Hikaru's house and calls for him. Hikaru's mother appears. She seems happy to see Yoshiki. He gives her the watermelon he bought. Hikaru's mother thanks him. Then we see Yoshiki looking at Hikaru, who is sleeping on the floor, and Yoshiki notices sweat on Hikaru's body. Yoshiki sits down. Suddenly, Hikaru pokes him with his foot and asks if he's just going to stare at him instead of waking him up. He compares him to the main character in an old video game. Suddenly, Hikaru hugs Yoshiki. Meanwhile, we see Hikaru's mother cutting the watermelon. Then we see Hikaru declaring victory over Yoshiki, who was sprawled on the floor behind him. He asks him if he brought them anything. Yoshiki answers that he brought a watermelon from his relatives. Hikaru is surprised because watermelon is his favorite fruit. Yoshiki knows that. Hikaru continues, "Did you devour it like in the comic books?" Yoshiki closes his eyes and replies that he knows that too. Hikaru looks at him in surprise. Yoshiki and Hikaru, who is happily eating watermelon, are sitting. Yoshiki asks him, "Do you remember the taste of watermelon?" Hikaru answers yes, and that he can now eat quickly. Hikaru devours the watermelon quickly. Yoshiki is disgusted by him, but he explains that it's amazing. At this moment, Hikaru tells him that he swallowed a seed, and he explains that he will become a watermelon man now. Yoshiki looks at him and falls silent. Hikaru suggests to Yoshiki that they play a game, but Yoshiki is not in the mood to play. Hikaru understands that. We see Hikaru's mother talking on the phone. Meanwhile, Yoshiki remembers when he and Hikaru were young, eating watermelon. He remembers Hikaru saying that he swallowed a seed and would turn into a watermelon man. Yoshiki falls silent and drifts off. We see pictures of sunflowers, and we see memories of Hikaru in the forest, and when he returned, we see Hikaru sleeping on the ground, and Yoshiki puts his hand on his face and explains that he can't do this alone, and act as if everything is normal. We hear Hikaru telling Yoshiki that hanging out with him is fun, and he thanks him for the watermelon. Yoshiki still has his hand on his face and asks Hikaru what's on his mind. Hikaru replies that he doesn't know, but he made sure Yoshiki knew his feelings. Yoshiki whispers that this is exactly what he should have done. Then we see Hikaru sleeping and Yoshiki standing in front of him. He notices that Hikaru is sleeping again and deeply asleep. He looks at an old photo of himself with Hikaru and his father. Yoshiki explains that Hikaru's father died a long time ago, when he went to the mountain, and that it was around this time that Hikaru went to the mountain. He looks at another picture and wonders what the meaning of Hikaru's facial expressions is, describing him as a fool. Yoshiki continues that Hikaru was the only child in the village his age, and that they spent their entire lives together, but the Hikaru in the pictures is gone. Thoughts revolve in his mind that he can't continue, and that the Hikaru in the pictures is gone, and that he won't accept this. Suddenly, Yoshiki spits. Then we see Yoshiki holding his phone and looking at the lady's name, and he wants to call. Hikaru speaks in his sleep about eating watermelon rind. Yoshiki sends a message to the lady. At this moment, Hikaru's mother calls him to help her. Yoshiki goes and leaves his phone on the table next to the sleeping Hikaru. After that, the lady sends a message asking Yoshiki if he is ready to talk. At the same moment, Hikaru wakes up. He sees the name Miss Kuribayashi, and he wonders who this is. After that, outside the store, Yoshiki stands. We see a message from the lady that she will be there in 5 minutes. At this moment, the lady arrives. She tells Yoshiki that the weather is very hot and asks him if he wants to eat. Yoshiki agrees. At the restaurant, we see Yoshiki sitting with the lady. The lady is happy when she sees on the menu that they have giant ice cream. She asks Yoshiki to order something. She asks him if he wants ice cream. Yoshiki quickly replies, "Okay." The lady understands here that Yoshiki wants to talk. She asks him what happened. Time passes, and we understand that Yoshiki told her everything. The lady understands that Hikaru is his close friend. The lady thanks him for telling her everything, and that he tried hard. Yoshiki bursts into tears and asks her why she is saying this. The lady explains that he should not punish himself, and that he should think logically, and she continues, "Being subjected to punishment by someone is only a way to make things easier for you, and it doesn't make a difference to the dead, but you must face the truth. We hold on to our loved ones, whom we have lost." Yoshiki asks in surprise, "We?" The lady apologizes to him and explains that she didn't mean to be bleak, and she continues, "If you two were mingling, you must have been close." Here we hear the waitress's voice asking them for their order. The lady tells her to bring 2 bowls of ice cream. After that, The lady asks Yoshiki if he noticed any strange events happening recently, whether in the city or the village, and that there was a malfunction somewhere. And she asks him, "Is this strange to you, isn't it?" And she continues that they are receiving visitors who should not be here, and that madness has begun to spread over the city and villages. Yoshiki looks at her in surprise. The lady continues that in her opinion, the cause of all this is that thing that replaced his friend Hikaru, and she continues, as if it were a massive mass of something, as if it were a creature from hell. And the moment I noticed its disappearance from the mountain, that distortion spread like wildfire, and she believes that it must be in the mountain to prevent the spread of this distortion. The lady asks Yoshiki if he remembers the woman who died in Kubitachi village, and she confirms that her death is related to the matter, and she explains that she is scared and wants to leave the city, but her daughter and mother-in-law are with her, and her eldest son left a while ago. Yoshiki asks her that she said, "Both of us," a little while ago, so what did she mean by both of us? The lady tells him that her husband came home one day, but things went badly, and he caused a wound to her son that never heals, and that she is willing to sacrifice so that he can return to her life again. And she asks Yoshiki that he knows he cannot stay with his friend in this way. And Yoshiki asks her what he should do. The lady tells him that she doesn't want him to end up like her, and that she saw that he should see the truth, so that he can get over it. And the waitress brings them the ice cream, and Yoshiki looks at her and drifts off. After that, at school, the weather is very rainy. We see a student saying that she forgot her umbrella, and we see students training. Then we see Yoshiki sitting alone in the classroom. Meanwhile, Hikaru was looking for him everywhere, and a student comes and greets Hikaru and asks her, "Did you see Yoshiki?" The student answers no. Yuki enters Yoshiki's classroom and asks him, "Are you still here?" Yoshiki explains to her that he forgot something. Yuki looks at him and tells him that Hikaru is looking for him, so he asked her to tell him to go home without him if she saw him. Yoshiki sits in the classroom and remembers Hikaru hugging him and telling him that he doesn't want to kill him. Yoshiki understands that Hikaru can kill him if he wants to, and the great Nonoki continues that it's something hidden in that mountain, and he continues, "The mysterious death of Miss Matsuura, a malfunction in the village," and he asks, "What are you, Hikaru?" And he remembers the lady's words when she told him to get over it. This voice repeats in his head, and at this moment, Hikaru finds him and tells him that he finally found him, and he asks him to go home together. Yoshiki tells him to go without him today. Hikaru asks him, "Are you in a bad mood today?" Yoshiki answers yes. Hikaru tries to make him laugh, and Hikaru is shocked that he doesn't laugh. He asks him, "What's wrong?" and he puts his hand on his shoulder, and we see Yoshiki removing his hand from him and asking him to get lost. Hikaru asks him, "Are you serious about that?" And he asks him, "Is it his fault?" Yoshiki looks at him and asks him, "What thing?" Hikaru explains to him that his mood is bad. Is he angry with him? Yoshiki tells him that he is not angry. So Hikaru asks him, "What's wrong with you today? Are you hiding something from me?" Yoshiki looks and asks him, "What are all these questions?" And he scolds him. Hikaru gets angry and asks him what he was doing on the weekend. And why is he messaging a strange lady? Yoshiki hesitates but tells him that he doesn't want to tell him anything. Hikaru gets angrier and explains that he used to tell him everything. Yoshiki angrily says, "Formerly," and he continues that Hikaru talks about past memories as if they belong to him. Hikaru looks at him in shock, and he understands the matter, that he is angry because he is not the real Hikaru. Suddenly, he grabs Yoshiki's hand tightly, and he asks him if he is not good enough for him, and we see Hikaru transforming into something strange. But Yoshiki explains that he resembles Hikaru in every way, but he is not him. Suddenly, we see Hikaru's eyes glow red, and he tells him that he is right, and Yoshiki is surprised, and Hikaru presses harder on Yoshiki's hand. And we see the creature appear, and Hikaru tells Yoshiki that he cannot continue without Yoshiki because he needs him. We hear Yoshiki asking him to leave, and that he doesn't need him, and that he is a fake person. Hikaru suddenly doesn't know how to describe his feelings now, and Yoshiki looks at him in astonishment and remembers the lady's words that they cannot stay together. Hikaru at this moment screams and cries and tells Yoshiki that he cannot stop himself from loving him, and suddenly we see the creature coming out of Hikaru's head, and Yoshiki watches this in shock, and the creature rushes from Hikaru's head upwards, and suddenly it falls on Yoshiki, and we see Hikaru's body lying on Yoshiki, and we see the creature covering Yoshiki's body, and we hear memories, and Yoshiki asks what the creature is doing, and he understands that it is invading his body, and we see memories. And Yoshiki wonders if this is Hikaru, but it's not him. What is he carrying? And suddenly Yoshiki gets up and feels suffocated, and he looks at Hikaru, and here Hikaru cries and asks himself what he is doing and puts his hands on his face, and he explains that he cannot do that, and he apologizes to Yoshiki. After that, we see Hikaru taking his bag and walking away, and Yoshiki is still sitting in his place. Hikaru, before leaving, asks Yoshiki not to hate him. After that, at Yoshiki's house, we hear Yoshiki talking to himself about how this thing everything is a substitute for Hikaru, and that it's pitiful because he tried to ignore it all this time, and that it's impossible to replace Hikaru, and that he can't treat it like the real Hikaru. That's why he said what he said. The next day, we see Yoshiki in class alone, and he notices Hikaru is absent. Yuki and Asako come to him and ask about Hikaru and why he hasn't come to school. They ask him if they had a fight. Asako tells Yoshiki that they need to fix things between them, and adds that Hikaru has been obsessed with him lately. She asks him not to be rude to him. Yuki also tells him that Hikaru has been attached to him recently. Asako compares him to a child, and jokes with Yuki. Yoshiki is surprised and repeats the word child. He remembers Hikaru calling out to him, and recalls Hikaru's last words to him, which were, "Don't hate me." He tells them that he will leave. We see Yoshiki ride his bike quickly, and go to Hikaru's house and ask if he's there. Then he stands in front of Hikaru, who is fully covered, and sits in front of him, apologizing for what happened yesterday. We hear Hikaru asking why he is apologizing, and that he is the one who should apologize to him. Yoshiki tells him he's not angry anymore, and reaches out his hand towards Hikaru. When Hikaru pulls his hand away, Yoshiki is startled. Hikaru explains that Yoshiki is afraid of him. Yoshiki denies it, but Hikaru insists that he must be scared after seeing him in this disgusting state. Yoshiki remembers, but Hikaru interrupts him and asks if he hates him. Suddenly, Hikaru removes his cover and gets closer to Yoshiki, asking him to stay with him, and that's all he needs. He cries and begs him not to hate him, and that he knows he is an intruder in his friend's body, and apologizes to him. Yoshiki makes it clear that this isn't good, that he shouldn't get close, because it's dangerous. But he reaches out his hand to Hikaru's face, and tells him that he's more mischievous than the real Hikaru. Hikaru then asks if he's angry with him. Yoshiki answers no, that he's just a small, naughty, lonely boy. Hikaru asks him if what he feels is called loneliness. Yoshiki looks at him and tells him he doesn't know, and adds that he thinks this version of Hikaru doesn't know anything, and if he's that naive, then he should teach him a few things. We see Hikaru feeding a cat and telling Yoshiki to watch him as he feeds it. Hikaru pets the cat, but suddenly the cat looks at him and runs away. Yoshiki tells him this isn't the right way to pet a cat. Hikaru tells him that there are a lot of things happening around him that he's unaware of, like what happened that day when he got excited, and that disgusting stuff came out of him, and he wants it to stop. Yoshiki wonders if Hikaru wants to improve himself, but then he remembers what the woman said when she asked if he'd noticed any strange events happening in the town or village. At that moment, Hikaru tells him to look at the cat while it's doing its business, and Yoshiki wonders, what is he planning to do with him? At school, in music class, we see Yoshiki, Hikaru, and their friends performing group songs, and during this, the teacher tells them there are only 2 weeks left until the big performance. After that, we see Yuki and Asako sitting together talking. Asako tells Yuki that Takeshita wanted to talk to her about something, and it turns out he wanted to arm wrestle her in front of all their classmates. Yuki laughs. Asako continues that she completely crushed Takeshita in front of everyone, and Yuki laughs again. Then, Yuki says she needs to go, waves goodbye to Asako, and leaves. After that, Asako hears a whisper in her ear telling her that he's coming. She suddenly stands up and calls to Yuki and advises her to avoid passing through those routes today. Yuki asks, "Really?" Asako says her intuition is usually right, and that she'll take a different path, waves goodbye, and leaves. Asako looks toward the train tracks and hears the whisper again. "He's coming, coming." She puts on her headphones and leaves. At Yoshiki's house, we see Hikaru sitting on the bed and Yoshiki sitting on the floor next to him. Yoshiki asks Hikaru if he wants to have dinner with him tonight. Hikaru refuses, saying he'll go eat hamburgers tonight. Yoshiki advises him not to cause any trouble. In the kitchen, we see Yoshiki's mother and his sister Kaoru, who is begging her mother that she wants to wear a yukata. Her mother replies that before that, they need to tell Aunt Mikasa to adjust the length. Yoshiki and Hikaru overhear them. Hikaru asks Yoshiki what's up with Kaoru. Yoshiki tells him his sister wants to wear a yukata for the summer festival. Hikaru shouts when he hears the words, summer festival. At the summer festival, we see Yoshiki, his sister, and Hikaru walking down the street. Hikaru asks Kaoru if walking hurts. She tells him she's fine. Yoshiki tells Kaoru it was a good idea to wear sneakers. At that moment, a shopkeeper tells Kaoru her yukata looks wonderful. Yoshiki looks at Kaoru and tells her it's cute, but Kaoru looks sad. Elsewhere, in a villager's house, we hear a man saying it was a bad idea to entrust the responsibility to the Andu family. He goes on to say that Yoki died and left his son to carry the burden. True, he returned, but he disappeared for a whole week, and he's sure all this happened because of the ritual's failure. We see Hikaru, Yoshiki, and his sister receiving some hot sweets from a vendor, who tells them it's free for kids. Yoshiki tells Kaoru to say thank you to the vendor. Kaoru thanks him. Yoshiki notices the vendor's necklace while asking his assistant where the extra oil is. We hear someone saying these are the children of the Tsujanaka family, and wonder how their mother allows her daughter to skip school. Hikaru asks Yoshiki if they want to get ice cream, but wonders where the ice cream vendor is. Yoshiki tells him he's at the shrine square. Hikaru takes Kaoru's hand, smiles at her, and asks if they can go. Kaoru smiles at him, and we see Kaoru holding the friends' hands as they walk. Then we see a man from the village clarifying that Hikaru is still a high school student, and the burden is heavy. He adds that if they want to perform the rituals again, only the men of the Andu family know how. Another man explains that Kuhei knew this would happen, and he said it wouldn't last. Then we see Tanaka getting out of his car, thinking he came down from the mountain. On the other side, a man from the village asks what they should do. He looks at the man in front of him. Another man scolds him for drinking at a time like this. The man retorts, "What about it? And what is this thing they're talking about anyway?" One of them tells him that this thing was destined for Kubitashi more than 300 years ago, and the people of the land are responsible for keeping it sealed forever. At this rate, their village is in danger. The other man replies that they don't have many options. He asks if Tanaka can really be trusted with a mission like this, because Tanaka is a mess, going around stomping on everything. Suddenly, Tanaka comes in, tells them he's rude, smiles, and says he took off his shoes and apologizes for his socks being torn. He sits with them and says he can't believe they kept up with this ritual for 300 years. One of the men asks him firmly what he means. Another says outsiders find it weird, but it's important for them. But Tanaka interrupts and throws a small head in front of them. The men are surprised and one asks, "Is this someone's head?" Tanaka tells them it wards off spirits, and he's sure the Andu family used it in the rituals on the mountain. Tanaka holds the head and explains that it makes it easier to get up to that cursed mountain if it's in your pocket, and asks what's the point of the ritual. One of the men replies that, as they told him before, it is rituals for the Mountain King. Tanaka explains that things are exciting here. First, rituals for the Mountain King. He opens the door and continues speaking. And second, a festival for the people today. One of the men tells him that their village is small, and these festivals are dear to them, and that they involve Kamima, Tsujanaka's wife, and everyone born outside the village to hold the festival. He continues that it's necessary to unite their village. Tanaka asks if this festival is also dedicated to the Mountain King. He continues saying that Kobitashi village is practically connected to Kibogayama city, and that there are small communities in the area. One of the men replies that this is true, and that it was a large village in the past. Another man shouts at him and orders him to be silent. Tanaka asks another man what he means. Tanaka smiles and explains that he finds it strange, because Kibogayama, Odikari, Ashiduri, and other areas have many churches, but Kobitashi has only the Nisayama shrine, and not a single church. And this shrine, he asks them if he should call it the group, and continues his question about what exactly they worship here. Meanwhile, we see Hikaru walking, and asking what's in the shrine. Yoshiki replies that there's also noodles, and Hikaru says let's go. One of the village men explains to Tanaka that what exists in the mountain is not related to the village. Another man explains that the thing is the Great Nunoki. The other man responds angrily and orders him to be silent. At this moment we see Hikaru calling Yoshiki, and suddenly something explodes. Tanaka's hamster screams. We see Yoshiki responding to Hikaru with "What?" We also see Tanaka quickly grabbing the hamster and rushing toward the door. One of the men asks him what's happening. Tanaka looks at him and tells him that the barrier is damaged. At this moment, Hikaru stands looking at his hand, wondering why it bounced back, understanding that there's a barrier preventing him from moving forward. Hikaru apologizes to Yoshiki, saying he needs to go to the bathroom, and asks if he should pay him. Yoshiki responds certainly. Hikaru looks at his hand again and sees sticky material coming out of it. He wonders who put it here, looks and says, "You annoying one." Yoshiki sits by the lake. Hikaru comes to him and asks where his sister Kaoru is. He replies that she's asking their mother for money. Yoshiki gives Hikaru a plate of ice cream. Hikaru thanks him. We see Tanaka rushing out. Hikaru asks Yoshiki what blue Hawaii flavor is. Yoshiki tells him and describes it. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka running and searching. Hikaru tastes the ice cream, which he describes as delicious, but a piece drops on the ground, making him sad. He looks at Yoshiki and asks, "What about me?" Yoshiki is surprised by his question. Hikaru continues and asks Yoshiki if he still looks the same to him. Yoshiki looks at him in wonder. Meanwhile, we see Kaoru walking beside her mother. We return to Yoshiki, who responds to Hikaru, telling him that his appearance hasn't changed. Hikaru is surprised. Yoshiki explains that his face looks happy to hear this. Hikaru tells him that he really doesn't know why. We see that Tanaka is still searching. He extends his hand and feels the barrier, explaining that it exists somewhere here. Hikaru asks Yoshiki to answer his question. Yoshiki asks what his question is. Hikaru asks him how he knew he wasn't the real Hikaru. Yoshiki tells him he knew when he saw Hikaru's corpse. We go back in time to when they were searching for Hikaru. One of the men asks Yoshiki's mother if she had seen Hikaru here. She tells them no. One of the men responds that he knew. It was that mountain. She goes to Yoshiki and asks him not to think about going there to search for him. She ordered him to stay home. After that, we see Yoshiki preparing to go look for Hikaru. His sister Kaoru sees him and asks where he's going. Yoshiki tells her that he's going out for a walk alone, but she tells him he's lying to her. She continues that children are supposed to stay home while adults are outside searching. But Yoshiki leaves the house and tells her he won't be late. We hear people calling for Hikaru. Yoshiki runs and searches for Hikaru. We see the village men calling for Hikaru. Yoshiki imagines that he found Hikaru, but when he shined the flashlight, he saw it was just a tree trunk. Suddenly, he found Hikaru lying on the ground. Yoshiki approached him and touched his face. Finding that his body was cold and not breathing, he gets up and looks at him sadly. He explains that his body was less damaged than he expected. He expects that the reason is the winter season. He explains that he should go and tell everyone that he found Hikaru. We find Yoshiki in his house with his mother hugging him. He explains that he was bedridden for a week, and when he woke up, Hikaru was there. Yoshiki continues that there were other strange things, but no one else noticed that he wasn't the real Hikaru. Hikaru explains that this is scary, and thinks he was in this state when he found him. He explains that fixing Hikaru's corpse took him days. He looks at Yoshiki and tells him that he hid the matter for half a year. Yoshiki explains that this is the reason he can't sleep at night. Hikaru tells him that he misses him a lot. We go back to an earlier time. Yoshiki tells Hikaru that he wants to move away from the village. Hikaru looks at him and asks why he wants to leave for the city. Yoshiki explains that he hates this village and wonders why everyone interferes in his family's affairs. Hikaru understands and asks if his parents fought again. Hikaru smiles. Yoshiki sadly explains that his parents always fight, and he heard that grandmother Yasuburo and others were speaking badly about them. Hikaru explains that there was also a fight at Yasuburo's house. He continues that the family heir Yosuke is sick. Yoshiki interrupts him and tells him that Yosuke is not sick. He continues that the village is small and everyone knows each other's news. Hikaru asks him to stay at his house today. Hikaru teases Yoshiki and smiles. We return to Yoshiki and Hikaru. We see Hikaru calling Yoshiki, who is crying, and asks Hikaru, "Why did you die and leave me?" Hikaru is surprised. Hikaru stands up and explains that he will go and give Yoshiki some time alone, but Yoshiki holds him, asking him not to go. After that, Hikaru explains that he cannot replace the real Hikaru, but he promises Yoshiki that he will always keep him safe, and if he needs anything, he will definitely do it. Then we see the village men asking Tanaka if this barrier he made prevents this thing from approaching them. They also ask him if he can make a barrier around the entire village. Tanaka explains to them that these barriers are expensive, and that each barrier he makes costs him an internal organ. The village men are surprised when they hear this. Tanaka continues that he hates the way his company works. A villager asks him if this thing is here. Tanaka replies that it's not here currently, but it was here. He explains that perhaps the festival crowd attracts it because these things prefer crowded places, but he cannot guess how this thing managed to make its way through this crowd without anyone seeing it. He thinks it turned into something else. At the railroad tracks, we hear a voice whispering that he's coming. We see a face emerging between the barriers. Suddenly, a hand hits something and makes a sound. After that, we see the lady who met Yoshiki in the store standing at the railroad tracks. She explains that she doesn't want to mess around like this. We see that she's remembering memories and hopes that Yoshiki is okay. We return to Hikaru's incident. We see Hikaru walking among the trees during rainfall carrying a bag. Suddenly his foot slips because of the mud and he falls to the ground and gets injured. He wonders if he's really going to die. He apologizes to his father because he failed in performing the Endo family duty, and that he didn't want his mother to suffer again, and that he also didn't want anyone to be sad, and that he would remain alone if he died. He meant Yoshiki. He didn't want him to stay alone. Suddenly he wonders what this is. He explains that he can't see clearly because of the blood in his eye. He sees a red light approaching him. Hikaru wonders if this is what the great Nunoki looks like. Hikaru raises his hand and asks that he needs anyone to let him stay by his side. The story starts with Kaoru in the bathroom, noticing a long hair fallen on the floor. She wonders whose hair it is because everyone in their family has short hair. She also sees hair dangling in the bathroom and finds it strange. She reaches her hand out, bringing it close to the hair, and suddenly, the hair gets pulled inside. Kaoru is shocked and scared. At that moment, Yoshiki asks his mom if he can borrow a headband because he needs it for home economics class. His mom asks why he doesn't just use a handkerchief, but tells him to ask Kaoru instead. Suddenly, they hear something fall in the bathroom. We can see the fear on Kaoru's face as she gets dressed. Suddenly, something moves quickly in the bathroom with her. Kaoru turns around and sees a strange figure behind the door. She calls her mom in fear. At school, we see students practicing singing. The teacher thinks they're better than before, but at the same time, he feels like the students haven't really changed or improved. In home economics class, Yoshiki's friend is happy because he loves fried chicken. Yuki tells him the food isn't ready yet and warns him not to get close to the hot oil. Then the chicken is ready, and the friend gets excited and eats some. Yuki tells him he should say thank you for the food before eating. They start arguing. Yoshiki thanks God for the food and notices his friends arguing. Hikaru comes over and tells Yoshiki his headband looks like something dead people wear. He says their group burned the chicken and asks if Yoshiki wants a piece. Yoshiki says he doesn't want any. Hikaru asks why Yoshiki was staring at the chicken while they cooked it. Yoshiki says the texture felt really similar to what he felt when he put his hand inside Hikaru's body. Hikaru is surprised and asks if that's really what Yoshiki was thinking, then laughs. Yoshiki asks him why he's laughing, and Hikaru asks if he wants to put his hand inside him again. Yoshiki is surprised. Next, Yoshiki and Hikaru are alone in a classroom. Hikaru asks Yoshiki to put his hand inside him again and tells him to hurry up, since he has club practice. Yoshiki asks him not to rush because he wants to prepare himself first. Yoshiki takes a deep breath, then puts his hand inside Hikaru's body. Yoshiki is surprised because the feeling isn't as bad as last time. Hikaru asks if he's starting to get used to Ith looks at Yoshiki. Suddenly, the substance moves from Hikaru to Yoshiki, and Yoshiki is in pain. Hikaru stares at him sharply. The substance starts spreading over Yoshiki's body. Suddenly, Yoshiki yells at Hikaru to stop, which surprises Hikaru. Afterwards, Yoshiki takes his hand out of Hikaru's body and asks what Hikaru just did. Hikaru says he was touching Yoshiki too, then adds that Yoshiki has to get used to it. Yoshiki asks if Hikaru is being honest, because he felt something weird. He asks if Hikaru does this to feel good himself. Yoshiki tells Hikaru he shouldn't do things that annoy other people, and Hikaru Agriche swears he's not lying and says he'll never lie to Yoshiki. Yoshiki looks at him and sort of believes him. Hikaru is surprised at that wording sort of believes. Yoshiki remembers what the lady said, that the merging process happens even if the person is alive, making the organs stick to the body and become part of it. It will be with him for the rest of his life and will start attracting things from the other world into ours. Yoshiki looks at his hand and sees that the mark on his hand has become darker than it was the day before. At Yoshiki's house, while eating with his mom and sister, Kaoru says she doesn't want to take a shower because of the fake hair ghost in the bathroom, but her mom tells her to stop being silly and just take her shower. Kaoru gets annoyed and upset because her mom doesn't believe her. Yoshiki thinks about what his sister said about the fake hair ghost and her fear of it. Then we see Tanaka sitting at home listening to some songs. At that moment, two men from the village come in. Mr. Takeda asks Tanaka how long he's going to sit around and play with his pet. Tanaka picks up his hamster and tells Mr. Takeda that it's his partner, not a pet, and tells him not to worry because he's got a plan. Takeda sees a sword and is surprised that its blade is worn down like it can't cut anything. Tanaka laughs and says the sword cuts just fine but not people. Mr. Takeda says he's right that just sitting here won't get them anywhere, and says he'll let the bell take care of the search. In the morning, we see Yoshiki has won a cat plush from the crane game. His friend congratulates him. Hikaru asks why he's so good at the game. Yoshiki says Kaoru makes him play it all the time. His friend says Yoshiki is really talented. Even his grades are good, but his only flaw is that he's too emotional. Yoshiki asks him to stop complimenting him. Hikaru says Yoshiki is always gloomy, and he can't picture him in a good mood. He jokes that maybe a dip in the pond will wash off his bad vibes. Yoshiki tells them he sleeps 8 hours a day. Hikaru and his friend crack up laughing at Yoshiki. Yoshiki gets mad and asks for his plush back, but his friend says he's going to keep it. After that, Hikaru asks his friend why he wants this plush maybe to give it to a girl. His friend blushes and says that's impossible and insists the plush is for him. Hikaru laughs at him. The friends are sitting together, and one of them asks Yoshiki about the fake hair ghost. Yoshiki says his sister Kaoru saw it, and it's scaring her so much she doesn't want to take a shower. His friend says that's silly, "It's just some hair." Yoshiki replies that his sister said it was a huge clump of hair, and no one in their family sheds like that. His friend laughs. Yoshiki adds that the ghost acts aggressive. Meanwhile, Hikaru keeps staring at Yoshiki and asks if he's seen it too, but Yoshiki says he hasn't. Hikaru then decides he'll go check out their bathroom. Yoshiki is surprised. Their friend says he's not getting involved since he's got things to do. We hear Yoshiki wondering what a ghost is doing in his house and what it wants. Hikaru answers that he doesn't know, and at the same time, we see a doll's head, and Kaoru gets scared of it. Hikaru continues, saying that this ghost is like a stain, and it probably just appears wherever people live. Meanwhile, we see their friend picking up the doll and giving it to a girl, and she laughs. Then we hear Yoshiki asking why, out of all the houses, this ghost ended up in his. Hikaru tells him that the ghost is attracted to him for some reason, maybe because he's nice, but Yoshiki points out that he's not that nice. Yoshiki goes back home with Hikaru, and Yoshiki asks Hikaru if he wants some barley tea, but Hikaru says he wants to take a bath first. In the bathroom, we see the two friends standing together. Yoshiki wonders if the ghost is gone. Hikaru says no, it's still here. Yoshiki is surprised. Hikaru adds that it's normal for ghosts to bother him, but why are they chasing Yoshiki now? Then Hikaru opens the bathtub. Yoshiki asks what he's doing. Hikaru says he's going to get rid of it and eat it like he did before. Yoshiki asks if Hikaru will be okay. Hikaru tells him not to worry, that he'll protect him. Hikaru steps in and closes the door behind him. Time passes, and Yoshiki is waiting for Hikaru to come out. Suddenly, there's a loud noise. Yoshiki gets worried about Hikaru. He goes to him, but when he puts his hand on the door, he feels something strange. Still, he enters and sees Hikaru collapsed in the water-filled tub. He asks Hikaru if he's okay and tries to wake him up. Suddenly, Yoshiki gets that same feeling he had when he put his hand inside Hikaru before, and all at once, something drags him into the bathtub. We see Yoshiki wrapped in hair getting pulled down, and then it's revealed that something is entering him. Then, suddenly, we see Yoshiki standing in a field. He's confused and asks where the bathtub went and whether he's dreaming. He turns and sees a huge slimy thing. Voices say, "Take some Chinese cabbage," and others say, "Our boy is such a naive, smart kid. Has he picked a college yet?" The boy can't find words to respond. We see Yoshiki stuck to this slimy thing. He screams in pain. People's voices get louder, talking about him and his sister. Suddenly, Yoshiki grabs his own head, and suddenly we see Hikaru standing in front of him, but younger, holding something in his hand. He asks Yoshiki not to run away. Yoshiki looks and realizes that what young Hikaru is holding is the bird they both took care of before, named Crowley. Young Hikaru tells him Crowley died because of Yoshiki's mistake. Yoshiki says it wasn't his fault, but Hikaru insists it was, and that it was Yoshiki's turn to feed him. Yoshiki explains that Crowley was a living creature and there was nothing they could do. Young Hikaru gets mad and tells him not to make excuses. Yoshiki tells him it's also his fault because he should have fed him before. Hikaru responds that today it was Yoshiki's turn to feed him. Yoshiki apologizes for forgetting and says he only made that one mistake. Hikaru angrily says that one mistake caused Crowley's death. Yoshiki tells him he also forgot to feed him twice before, but that he fed Crowley for him. But young Hikaru just gets angrier and demands that Yoshiki admit he killed the bird. We see Yoshiki get angry, and now Yoshiki is younger too. He tells Hikaru it's not his fault. They start yelling at each other and blaming one another. Their anger grows and they start physically fighting. Suddenly, Yoshiki is in the bathtub lunging at Hikaru. Hikaru looks at him, but to his shock, Yoshiki puts his hand over Hikaru's mouth, as if to kill him, and scratches his face. But Hikaru pushes him away. Yoshiki gets out of the water, and Hikaru sees that the ghost has possessed Yoshiki and is using him as a shield against Hikaru. Yoshiki bites Hikaru's arm, and the slimy substance comes out. It surrounds Yoshiki, and then we see the ghost's shadow coming out of Yoshiki's body, and the ghost stands over them. Yoshiki looks at Hikaru and sees the bite mark on his arm and asks what happened. Hikaru says it's finally over, but we see the ghost is still there. Hikaru glares at it. Then suddenly, the ghost disappears. Yoshiki tells Hikaru he's bleeding. Hikaru looks at him and smiles. After that, Yoshiki apologizes to Hikaru. Hikaru asks why he's apologizing, and says that he told him before that he's weak against these things. He admits he messed up by letting the ghost escape him. Hikaru tells Yoshiki it's a good thing he was able to resist. Yoshiki thinks to himself that what he remembers is his hand drowning Hikaru, and wonders what if he someday kills him. Hikaru says it almost happened, but he's glad he came back for him. He goes on to tell Yoshiki that he promised to protect him, but every time he remembers what happened, it makes him want to cry. Yoshiki asks why he's making it such a big deal. Hikaru says he doesn't know, it just happens without thinking. Hikaru gets up and suggests they change their mood and asks what Yoshiki thinks about going frog hunting. Yoshiki smiles and tells him that's way too country. Hikaru gets it and tells Yoshiki that he hates the country countryside, but at the same time, he likes it, and that there are things there you can't find in the city. Yoshiki tells him he gets that, but still feels like he doesn't belong here. He asks Hikaru if he finds everything here fun. Hikaru looks at him and smiles. At that moment, Yoshiki's mother comes back and looks at them, asking if they jumped in the river. Kaoru asks Hikaru what's with the bandage, but Hikaru just asks what's for dinner tonight. Yoshiki's mom says it's hamburger steak. Kaoru points out that Hikaru loves eating. Hikaru looks at her and says, yes, because he's still growing, and jokes with them. At that moment, Yoshiki looks at Hikaru, thinking, what if that monster decides to attack them? Yoshiki appears behind him and tells him that his growth period is over, and asks if he minds if he eats his food. Yoshiki looks at him surprised, and says his growth phase isn't over yet. Hikaru jokes with Kaoru, and Yoshiki thinks to himself that that's not Hikaru, not a human. But maybe if things stay the way they are, Hikaru can live a normal human life. Hikaru looks at him, smiles, and says the hamburger steak is going to be awesome. Yoshiki looks at him and replies, for sure. After that, we see Tanaka with Mr. Takeda arriving at a shrine. Takeda thinks to himself that it's just a small shrine. Suddenly, Tanaka kicks the shrine with his foot, trying to break it. Takeda tries to stop him. Tanaka explains that it's down below. He pulls out a knife and cuts his own hand. He puts the bell on his wounded hand and then throws the bell away. Takeda asks him what that was. Tanaka explains that the bell works like a hunting dog and will track down that thing the villagers call the Great Mononoke, and adds that those things stick to the bell, and if it moves, they'll need a sharp sense of smell to find it. Takeda looks at him and thinks that Tanaka might be dangerous for his village, and believes he'll destroy this place one day, and honestly hopes it happens as he watches Tanaka walk away.